Well, welcome everybody to our fall kickoff weekend. And as we do once each month, we're going to take a moment now to stand and introduce ourselves to someone around us and try to find somebody that you haven't introduced yourself to before. I see you all the time, but I don't think I've ever actually shaken your hand and said hi. How are you doing? Good to see you. Doing all right. Okay, you can take your seat again. It took you guys a minute to get started, but once you did, there was just no turning it off, and that's great. Now, I don't know about you, but for the past 2 weeks, I've really found myself struggling to get back into a routine. For 3 months, our school was closed. Parish organizations and ministries took a break, including my weekly men's small group. So from June to September, my schedule and routine changed drastically. And that was good in lots of ways. I had time to relax, to recharge my batteries, and to plan for the year ahead. But it has made starting up again difficult. Has anybody else been struggling with that this fall? Maybe with having to set an alarm, waking up earlier, going to bed sooner, maybe being busier all of a sudden, and of course, dealing with more traffic. But like it or not, fall is here with its changes, its challenges, and with difficult things we all have to do. So today we're launching our first fall message series titled, Do It Anyway. Now, over the summer, we took a break from our series, but they're starting up again. And here's what this series is all about. Over and over in the Bible, we hear God command us to love and forgive others. But doing this isn't easy. It might mean having a difficult conversation or struggling with things in life that are unfair or dealing with people who have differing viewpoints. So in this series, we'll discover how we can tap into the healing power of compassion with any difficult individual or situation we face. Because even though it isn't easy, we're called to do it anyway. And today's readings got us started in a really big way about how to have difficult conversations. So let's look at today's gospel. Now, if we find things about life to be difficult, we can take some comfort knowing that Jesus and his followers did too. Even they encountered difficult people. And Jesus told his disciples how to resolve conflict and how to have difficult conversations. He just told us, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've won over your brother. If he does not listen, take 1 or 2 others along with you, so that every fact may be established on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell the church. If he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a Gentile or tax collector. So Jesus is giving us a 4-step process. Step 1. Go to the person first. Notice who you don't go to first. everyone else. And let's be honest and admit, this is not most people's first step. They do the exact opposite. They talk about it to everybody but the person they're at odds with. If it's a family member that they're on the outs with, they tell everyone else in the family. If it's someone in their circle of friends that they have a disagreement with, they talk about it with all the other friends in the circle. If it's a coworker or classmate, everyone starts gossiping about him or her. The same thing happens in the neighborhood, in school communities, and even in parishes. It's so commonplace that we see no problem with doing it. And we excuse our behavior by saying that we're just venting. But it's not an excuse. And just venting to others usually makes things worse. Telling everybody else that someone hurt you might make you feel good. It might gain you some allies, but it doesn't solve the problem. And it probably won't bring the offending party around to your way of thinking. When everybody else is dragged in from the start, the one who hurt you ends up being shunned or excluded or canceled. That's how the world operates. But it's not how disciples are commanded to treat others. Jesus said, go to the person first. And if that doesn't work, Jesus gives us a second step. Bring one or two others into the conversation. Why? Well, not to gang up on the person, not so that others can argue your point of view. Jesus told us why. One or two others to help you establish the facts, to try to figure out what happened, how it can be resolved. So rather than allies to fight for your side, these two or three are more like mediators. They can help you figure out who did what, who said what, and how can it be fixed. Lord? Once the facts are established and agreed upon, then you can start to move towards a resolution. Now, when deciding who those one or two others will be sure to choose people who have everyone's best interest at heart. If bringing one or two others into the conversation doesn't resolve the matter, Jesus offers a third step. Tell the church. Now, this step can be a trickier one to figure out than the first two. Jesus is not suggesting that you stand up at Mass and accuse someone who wronged you. Tell the church is Jesus saying we should seek the wisdom of the community to resolve a dispute or to challenge someone's harmful, destructive, or toxic behavior. When I hear Jesus say this, what comes to mind for me are resources like pastoral counseling and spiritual direction. Telling the church could include getting input and encouragement from members of your small group, your Bible study, or your ministry. It's seeking support and guidance from others who might have some expertise with what you're struggling with. Again, this isn't about making you right and the other person wrong. It's about trying to resolve the issue. And finally, but only as a last resort, only after everything else you tried didn't work, Jesus says you should limit the relationship. His exact words were, treat them as you would a Gentile or a tax collector. That might sound harsh, but I don't think that's how Jesus meant it. I mean, Christians and Jews lived among Gentiles, especially in bigger towns and cities like Jerusalem, and everyone had to deal with tax collectors. So the average disciple would have had regular interactions with non-believers, with Gentiles and tax collectors. But these interactions would have been limited, respectful, cordial, but limited. You didn't treat Gentiles and tax collectors the same as you would family or friends. And that's what Jesus meant when he said, if you've exhausted all other options to reconcile with that person who hurt you, limit your exposure to them. Not hate them, not spend the rest of your life harboring a deep grudge. Be cordial if you see him or her. Be respectful, but limit your exposure. This helps you to move on. It will bring you some peace of mind, and it will stop that person from living rent-free in your head. Throughout this whole process, Jesus wants you to act like a Christian, which means letting go of the desire to seek revenge or cause further hurt. Being a Christian means you decide to be the bigger person and take the first step. It also means not assuming the worst about the person, so presume some goodwill on their part. And if you are correcting someone, your goal is to make sure they know you want the best for them. People take correction much better if they know you are on their side. And acting like a Christian also means praying throughout this process. Praying before you have the conversation, praying while you're having the conversation, and praying after you've had the conversation. Prayer is one of the most important tools at your disposal for doing this difficult thing Jesus is asking you to do. Prayer has the power to soften your heart and the heart of the person you need to reconcile with. So a 4-step process from Jesus for how to have a difficult conversation when you've been hurt by a family member, a friend, someone close. And it is difficult. It's something we just as soon not do. But avoiding the person or the problem is not the answer. It's not healthy. Putting off a difficult conversation won't make it go away. In my experience, delaying only makes things worse. And that's because the longer you wait, the bigger it gets in your mind. Today, Jesus is saying to all of us, I know it's hard. Do it anyway. If you're skeptical that this can work, or just wonder why this is important to do, today's second reading gave us the reason. St. Paul wrote a letter to the disciples of Jesus living in Rome. They were struggling with some of these same issues. Here's what he commanded them to do. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no evil to the neighbor. Hence, love is the fulfillment of the law. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do no evil. Love fulfills God's law. So love is the reason why we must do this. Love, not hate. Forgiveness, not revenge. Healing, not hurting. Our goal must be to rescue the relationship. And that's because God dwells in relationships. What did Jesus say at the very end of today's gospel reading? He said, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. The subtitle for this message series is Healing the World One Relationship at a Time, which reminds me of a quote from St. Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa. She said, I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the water to create many ripples. Anytime you decide to take on something challenging, like having a difficult conversation, it's as if you're casting a stone in a pond. It will have ripple effects beyond you and the other person. It will affect all your other relationships, and all of the other person's relationships. And that's the power to be found in healing and reconciliation. As I've been preaching this message, someone might have come to your mind, someone you need to have a difficult conversation with. In just a few moments in our prayer of the faithful, you will hear a petition asking God to help you begin the process. Think of the person at that moment and ask the Lord to give you the courage and strength to take the first step. Ask the Lord to fill you with love and compassion. And over the next week, spend some time reflecting on the 4 steps that Jesus gives. Ask yourself, what might be keeping you from doing this? Is it pride or anger or resentment? Imagine how different your life would be if you were free of those negative feelings. That's the life Jesus wants for you. So as difficult as it is, resolve today to do it anyway. Amen.